order of the Gemara, the order of the Masechta. So if you take a look at paragraph Zayin, he says as follows: Zman Kriyas Shema talui bizman achila b'mishnah dereish brachas. V'sham b'brayso amud beis. So here the Rebbe is going to quote from the Gemara. So remember again, referencing the first Mishnah of Maseches Brachas. So the Gemara or the Mishnah explained that me'imasai korna shema ba'arvin. When do we say shema at night? So remember again a little chazara. B'shah shakohanim nichnasan le'echol b'trumasan. From the time that the kohanim go in to eat their truma, right? If a kohen was ritually impure, he went to the mikvah. He had to wait until nightfall, and then he would go in to eat his truma. So from the time that a kohen goes in to eat his truma, again, and then there was a machlokes until the end time. We're not focusing on the end time right now, but at least focusing on the start time. So it's interesting that Shalom Aleichem David Brenner from Eretz Yisrael, and David Kahana from Eretz Yisrael. Baruch Hashem, such a schus to be able to learn with Jews in Eretz Yisrael. Incredible. So I'll say, I think there was others. I think there's also Richard Levine, who's also from Eretz Yisrael joining in. Okay, in any event. So it's interesting the Gemara says that we link the Kriyas Shema to the consumption of Truma. In other words, Kriyas Shema is linked to eating. Now the truth is, the Mishnah speaks about the time when the Kohanim go in to eat. But remember again, if you remember from the Gemara in Amud Beis, the Gemara also lists a number of other time frames that are also linked to eating. So what Reb Tzaddik is picking up on is why the connection between Shema and eating. So look what he says. Ki achilo hu kiyum hachayim v'kach kabbalas ol malchus shamayim. Says Reb Tzaddik, because at the end of the day there's a very strong correlation between consumption, between eating and kabbalas ol malchus shamayim. What's the connection? The same way that a person can't live without food, the same way that a person can't live without eating, so a person can't live without kabbalas ol malchus shamayim. Person can't live without a relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. Person can't live without that connection, without that dveikus. Now, of course, could a person physiologically live? Of course, just like a person could technically live for a little while without food also, right? But lamaisa, the bodily processes begin to collapse. So a Jew without kabbalas ol malchus shamayim, a life without a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is an unsustainable life, at least in a meaningful capacity. Now, interesting enough, now we know the same way that at least it's very interesting that when one looks at Talmudic eating habits, they didn't necessarily eat 3 meals a day. Although again, there's even a machlokes about everything. There's also machlokes about how you should eat, right, or when you should eat. So the Tzaddik says, just like normally a person would eat in the morning and in the evening, you have 2 big meals a day. So too, kabbalas ol malchus shamayim is in the morning and in the evening. Uman dar is supposed to say. Therefore, again, that's the idea on a basic level. Again, the connection between achila and kabbalas ol malchus shamayim, just like achila, eating is an indispensable part of the human condition. If I don't eat, I die. For the Jew, kabbalas ol malchus shamayim, means everything that we've learned up until now. Our relationship with Hashem, a dveikus b'Hashem, recognizing that I am the worker of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore I have to give my employer maximum output. I can't live life without that. Impossible to have life without that. But then he goes on, he says something amazing. He says, Uman da'amar, me'ani, supposed to remember again, the Gemara on Amud Beis. Let me see if I can pull it up here quickly. I will quote it to you. The Gemara in Brachas quoted the idea. It's okay. The Gemara in Brachas discussed the idea that another opinion as to when you could begin to recite Shema at night. Because remember again, the Masechta begins with Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis. Is B'sha Sha'ani Nichnas Le'echol Pito B'melach. When can you begin to say Shema at night? When the ani, the pauper, goes in to eat his bread with salt. With salt. So says Reb Tzaddik Sunu, what's the pshat? What's the meaning in that? So he says something amazing. He says, "Man da'amar me'ani v'das she'ino ner laha'ir einei sichlo u'memaher b'achila pshuto." So if you remember back to the Gemara, the opinion that said that you can begin to say Kriyas Shema at night from the time that an ani goes in to eat his bread, that was an earlier opinion than the Mishnah. Remember the Mishnah quoted, when can you begin to say Kriyas Shema at night? When the Kohanim go in to eat their Truma. And says Rashi on the Mishnah, when do the Kohanim go in to eat their Truma? Tzeis HaKochavim, nightfall. Amud Beis, when can you begin to go ahead and say Shema? From the time that a pauper goes in to eat his bread. And says Rashi, when does a pauper eat his bread? It's actually earlier. Why? Because a pauper often doesn't have a candle. He doesn't have a candle. So because he doesn't have a candle, therefore halacha l'maisa, he eats while it's still a little bit of light, and he eats quickly before the night dissipates, before the day dissipates and the night comes. So says Reb Tzadok, listen to how beautiful this is. So what's the pshat? What's the message in this? See, he says something amazing. He says the pauper, refers to an ani bidas, someone who is maybe intellectually impoverished. Now, I don't mean someone God forbid is mentally handicapped. I mean mentally impoverished. So the Rebbe says he's a very pashut person. He doesn't have deep thoughts. He doesn't have profound insights. He doesn't have a deep understanding of himself, of God, of the world, or of anything. He's pashut. He's simple. He's simple. Look at the Rebbe's words. Man dara me ani bidas she'eno ner laha'ir sichlo. So this ani, who the Rebbe's understanding is someone who's not necessarily, it is not a statement on his financial status, but more a statement ultimately again of his spiritual status. He's pashut. He's intellectually poor, not he's spiritually poor, but not that he's lacking. There's just not a depth. It's very pashut. It's very simple. He says umemaher ba'achila pshuta. So this ani, when he goes in to eat, so how does he have his meal? We'll say there's no appetizer. There's no appetizer, and then afterwards some sorbet to cleanse your palate, and then wine pairings with every single course, and fine china and linen napkins. The ani doesn't have any of that. What does he have? He's got a little bit of bread. He's got a little bit of salt, maybe a little bit of something else. He eats it. It's quick. He's done. He moves on. So listen to this. Kach kabbalas ol malchus shamayim bepshitos ke'ani zeh she'ochal rak pas b'melach. Both say, listen to how profound this is. Says the Rebbe, the Gemara is telling us that sometimes when you're mekabel ol malchus shamayim, when it comes to your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you should be an ani b'das. There's a concept of just being a pashat yid. There's a concept of just being a simple Jew. That not everything has to have multiple layers of understanding. And now, I know this sounds strange, not everything has to have multiple layers of depth. That sometimes the most beautiful thing that you could find in your relationship with Hashem, in your emunah, in your kabbalas ol malchus shamayim, is simplicity. Is simplicity. I've said this over many times. I remember my grandfather, Zichron Livracha, who came to his country after the war. He was an incredible individual. He was summer times when he used to spend, they lived in Vineland, New Jersey. So I remember when we were very little, he used to learn with us Mishnayos. And when we had a question, we would ask him, Zaidi, what does this mean? Or why? I think the other question was why. So he would always give the same answer, Shteit in the Torah, because that's what it says in the Torah. And when I was little, we assumed that he just didn't know the answer. So that's what he was just saying, Shteit in the Torah. That's what it says. And then it was only as I got older that I realized that he was trying to teach us an incredible lesson of emunah pshuta. You don't have to understand everything. Not everything has to make sense to you. Not everything has to appeal to you. Sometimes you just have to be an ani. And just like the ani goes in with incredible simplicity and just eats his bread, says his brachas, benches, and moves on. So there's a beautiful element, there's a beautiful yesod to bring our simplicity to our avodas Hashem. To just be like the ani. I will say sometimes we get so complicated. Why? And sometimes it's okay just to say, Kadosh Baruch Hu told me to do it, so I'm going to do it. I don't understand it. Okay. It doesn't make sense to me. Okay. It doesn't appeal to me. Okay. But that's the ani b'das. Like that's the ani. The ani goes in and he eats his simple bread. He eats his simple meal. Sometimes when it comes to kabbalas ol malchus shamayim, our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's okay to be a pashat yid. It's okay just to be simple. Now I want to point something out. which is, as you notice over here, what the Rebbe is doing, we'll have to stop over here for today, but what the Rebbe is doing is, he's taking each of the opinions of the Gemara, and again, not deciding on them, but obviously what the Rebbe is trying to highlight for us is the articulation of these opinions, each of them yield a different level of understanding. So in the Rebbe's model, they're all correct. They're all correct, and they all contribute to a holistic Kabbalah's Omachus Shamayim. So the notion, number one, that Kabbalah's Omachus Shamayim is linked to eating tells me that just as eating is an indispensable life activity, so too Kabbalah's Omachus Shamayim, relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is indispensable if a person wants to have a happy, meaningful, fulfilling life. Number two, another shita. When do you go in to eat your bread? When the ani goes in to eat his bread. The ani is very pashut, very simple. So too, I will say sometimes in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's good to have an element of pashtus, an element of simplicity. Just like the ani goes in, no frills, doesn't need to understand multiple layers and anything. Just serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu because you have the opportunity and the privilege to do so. All right, so we'll have to stop over here. We'll continue our session with the rest of Sif Zayin tomorrow.